do you think?
This is an arrogant strategy of billionaire boys.
So if you want to cry and feel emotionally devastated and otherwise obliterated, by all means.
The drone was immediately destroyed.
28 days after Iran's Revolutionary Guard shot down an American drone, an act that nearly started a war, the U.S. Navy took down an Iranian drone in the Strait of Hormuz. It happened on the same day that Iranian state media reported the Revolutionary Guard captured an oil tanker they claim was smuggling fuel. And all of this is happening while Iran's foreign minister is in the U.S. attending a UN meeting. After 5 days of protests calling for his resignation, Puerto Rico's governor Ricardo Rosselló remains defiant, saying he's, quote, committed to the island and his office. Thousands marched in San Juan after the same journalists who leaked a damning group chat between Rosselló and several officials published new allegations of corruption within the administration. A federal judge has rejected Jeffrey Epstein's request for bail, siding with prosecutors who argued he's a flight risk and a danger to the community. A date hasn't yet been set for Epstein's trial on sex trafficking charges, and until then, he'll remain in jail. Newly unsealed documents from the investigation into payouts made to women who claim they had affairs with President Trump before the 2016 election suggest that the president not only knew about the payments, but he was involved in their planning. Prosecutors listed calls between Trump, his former attorney Michael Cohen, and then aide Hope Hicks, around the time Cohen paid $130,000 for Stormy Daniels' silence. Berkeley's city council voted to remove gendered language from its municipal codes, meaning that from August 1st, it'll become a city where a workforce is used to fix a maintenance hole out the front of a collegiate Greek system residence.
When your supporters last night were chanting, "Send her back," why didn't you stop them? Why didn't you ask them to stop saying that?
Well, number one, I think I did. I started speaking very quickly. It really was a loud, I disagree with it, by the way, but it was quite a chant, and I felt a little bit badly about it, but I will say this, I did, and I started speaking very quickly.
That's how President Trump describes his reaction to his supporters' chants at a campaign rally in North Carolina last night. So let's go to the videotape.
Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds.
This was the clearest evidence yet of what the 2020 race will be like. The president fueling his campaign with racism and nationalism, and the Democrats having to respond every time Trump hits the trail. Both those Democrats he's targeting.
This is not about me. This is about us fighting for what this country truly should be and what it deserves to be.
And those challenging him for the White House. In a campaign defined by race, that won't always be easy, especially in states where Trump skillfully leveraged white resentment in 2016.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Trump Broken Promises bus tour. We're going to find all broken promises across these 3 states that Trump has made, and we're going to talk about real promises and real solutions to the problems people have. It'll be fun.
Kristen Gillibrand's near the bottom of the 2020 pack by every measure. So she did what campaigns do when they need a little love from the political press. She got a bus, hit the road, and tried her best to seem like she was enjoying herself.
Hey everybody! Welcome to my bus. What do you think? You like it? I'll come back.
Are you having fun doing this?
I am. So bus tours are fun. And this is day 1. We'll be at it for a few days. I have a whole bunch of reporters in the back of the bus, which is great, and my staff. And we've got some plans tonight for some cards, maybe a little whiskey, I don't know.
She's focusing on Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan, all states that twice went to Obama and then went to Trump in 2016. That includes Youngstown, a Democratic stronghold Trump nearly flipped last cycle, winning over some union workers with his pledge to rip up NAFTA and bring back auto manufacturing jobs. But that didn't happen here. General Motors shuttered its plant in nearby Lordstown a few months ago.
I gotta tell you, coming to Youngstown, Ohio, coming to this community that has really borne the brunt of President Trump's broken promises is one of the most important things I'm going to do in this presidential campaign.
Gillibrand's visit is also a reminder of the challenges her party faces here with white voters.
Now, this is an area that across all demographics has been depressed because of the loss of its industry and the opioid crisis. So what do you have to say to people in this area about so-called white privilege?
I understand families in this community are suffering deeply. I fully hear from you and folks that I've talked to just in the few minutes I've been here that it is devastating when you've lost your job, you lost your ability to provide for your kids, that when you've put 20, 30 years into a company that all of a sudden doesn't care about you and won't call you back and gives you a day to move, that is not acceptable and not okay. So no one in that circumstance feels privileged on any level. But that's not what that conversation is about.
What is it about?
I'm going to explain. What that conversation about is when a community has been left behind for generations because of the color of their skin. When you've been denied job after job after job because you're black or because you're brown. Institutional racism is real. It doesn't take away your pain or your suffering. It's just a different issue.
A lot of union members here voted for Clinton. For them, it's not a matter of whether they prefer Gillibrand to Trump. It's whether they should consider another New York senator over a front-running populist like Warren or Sanders, or a battle-tested Rust Belt native like Biden.
How has the Trump presidency affected your life here in Youngstown, Ohio, if it has at all?
It has. I have no job. The same job that he told me don't sell my house for. The same job he said is coming back. Where is it?
Do you think that Senator Gillibrand could beat him in a general election?
I don't know.
After Youngstown, Gillibrand took this message to Cleveland, Flint, and Lansing. As the bus tour ended, a new poll showed her at 0%, lower than not sure and none.
I want to ask you about just a few headlines that have been in the news about you. The New York Times had a headline recently that said Kirsten Gillibrand is struggling. Politico said Kirsten Gillibrand's failure to launch. Do you get sick of reading headlines like that?
Well, I know why I'm running for president, and I know that my message is the strongest one. I mean, I've taken on the Pentagon, banks, Congress itself. I've voted against President Trump's agenda more than anybody else. I do take on the fights others won't.
So then why aren't you doing better in the polls?
I think it's because it's just early. I don't have the name recognition that some of our frontrunners do. So a lot of polling is sometimes
You're
just
a U.S. senator, though. I mean,
yeah, but there's 100 of us, and you'll just see I probably only have 50% name recognition. It's just going to take longer because I'm introducing myself to the American people, and they don't know much about me.
Gillibrand says she just needs more time, but she may not get it. Monday, the FEC published second quarter fundraising numbers showing that her campaign is struggling and burning through cash faster than any other candidate.
Will you make it to these states in this campaign race if you can't break through in Iowa and South Carolina?
Yeah, I will. And I think it's important to speak to all Americans everywhere. Those white suburban ladies in Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania, I've delivered a message that not only encompasses their concerns and worries, but also encompasses the concerns and worries of our base, of black women, of communities of color, of hardworking Americans who can't make ends meet. And I've delivered a message that speaks to all of them.
Last month, Facebook announced plans for Libra, its digital currency. The company says it wants to create a new global financial system, regulated by a group in Switzerland.
So why is it simple to send one of these anywhere in an instant, but not money? This is Libra.
The reaction from US lawmakers was swift and ruthless. They hate it. Facebook executive David Marcus, who's in charge of the project, tried to stave them off in hearings this week.
We recognize we're only at the beginning of this journey. Federal Reserve Chairman Powell has said publicly that the process for launching Libra needs to be patient and thorough, rather than a sprint to implementation. We will take the time to get this right.
Some lawmakers, mostly Republicans, praised Facebook's attempts to try something new.
Washington must go beyond the hype and ensure that it's not the place where innovation goes to die.
Before lawmakers could get into the particulars of regulating a cryptocurrency, they first had to address their deep distrust of Facebook.
They are playing with like a toddler who has gotten his hands on a book of matches. Facebook has burned down the house over and over and called every arson a learning experience.
Facebook now wants to control the money supply. What could possibly go wrong?
Facebook isn't the only tech company Congress grilled this week. Google got questions about censoring speech, and Amazon and Apple were accused of being monopolies. But Facebook also got a slap from this guy.
The Treasury Department has expressed very serious concerns that Libra could be misused by money launderers and terrorist financiers.
Even President Trump put out some surprisingly coherent tweets critiquing why, if Facebook wants to, quote, become a bank, it doesn't follow the rules that banks play by. Republicans and Democrats both have good reasons to hate Facebook. In the past year, they've grilled the company about privacy concerns and its failure to regulate fake news and hate speech. And even though many don't believe it's a big enough fine, last week the Federal Trade Commission agreed to settle an investigation into its repeated privacy violations for $5 billion. Those on the right dislike the idea of hippie liberals in Silicon Valley controlling one of the most influential websites in the world. And those on the left think the company is reckless, irresponsible, and to blame for killing local newspapers while shaping politics on an international scale. Do you trust Facebook?
Oh, absolutely not. I don't trust Facebook. As a matter of fact, that's part of their problems. Most of the members of Congress don't trust Facebook.
What do you make of Facebook's strategy here? They're kind of proposing the idea and coming to Congress, but they're not actually rolling it out yet. What do you make of them trying to convince
Basically,
Congress?
I think this is an arrogant strategy of billionaire boys who have decided that they're going to have a global operation with this Libra and Calibra. They didn't really come to Congress with a legitimate conversation and discussion about how can we do this. They've basically made up their minds, and they expect us to fall in line, but we won't.
Moscow has 12 million people and no system for them to recycle. That means a lot of garbage. About 10 million tons a year, in fact. It all ends up in overflowing landfills that poison people downwind.
С этой стороны видно, да, видите? И тот полигон видно. Это вот сама сортировка, якобы где сортируют мусор.
In one suburb in March last year, 57 kids got so sick from fumes they were hospitalized.
Когда стало часто сильно накрывать вонью вот этой свалочным газом, у меня внучка среди ночи могла просто во сне начинать блевать. Вот она несколько раз чуть в своем блевоте не захлебнулась. Если ветер с полигона в нашу сторону, просто с носа идет кровь. Может, 6 раз на день. А вы проедьтесь на кладбище, посмотрите. У нас 17-18 год, 19-й кладбище выросло в 2 раза. И все молодые. Единицы пожилых людей.
Russia's garbage isn't just affecting people outside Moscow. It's a problem for the entire country and puts the health of an estimated 17 million people at risk. But the Kremlin's plan, for Moscow at least, has been to just build a new landfill in an otherwise pristine stretch of swamp and forest. The Shias region is 800 miles north, far enough to put Moscow's mess out of sight. But not far enough to put off activists willing to make the 3-day trip.
Это все равно экологическая катастрофа.
Одна из главных причин, почему именно в этом месте нельзя строить свалку, то, что Шиес и местность вокруг Шиеса — это сплошное болото. И вот это болото, оно питает 140 ручьев. Эти ручьи стекают в реку Вычегда, и совершенно очевидно, что вот эти сточные воды со свалки, они вот этим маршрутом очень быстро отравят колоссальные территории. То есть
Здорово. Рад тебя видеть. С приездом.
Unauthorized protests are illegal in Russia, but these have been going on for 6 months.
Здесь у нас припасы, скажем так. Вот там у нас теплица с одеждой, которую мы храним для приезжающих людей, чтобы им утеплиться. В чем вы можете убедиться, если вы замерзнете, мы найдем вам фуфайки. Вот это вот, обратить следует внимание особое. Здесь написаны у каждого пакетика, какой мусор куда складывается, скажем так. Поскольку, если мы продвигаем идею раздельного сбора отходов, и сами мы являемся протестным движением против мусора.
They've managed to barricade the dump site, forcing a work stoppage.
Офигеть. Ну вот, добро пожаловать. Добро пожаловать на русский север. Было бы здорово.
Это Питер такой тираж сделал, да?
Вообще супер. Сумки, вещи, супер.
Police regularly show up here and try to remove protesters. But so far, the people here have held their ground. They say protests aren't just about trash. They're about a divide between the capital and the countryside, the haves and have-nots, the bureaucrats allegedly profiting from waste contracts, and the villagers forced to smell their garbage and smile.
После чего я увидел новости, что здесь происходит вопиющее беззаконие, то, что здесь бьют женщин, мужчин, то, что, активировались. Я сразу же отправился сюда.
The regional governor of the Shias, Igor Orlov, has tried to sell the dump as a jobs creator. It's been bizarrely branded as an eco-tech park.
Москва 2 миллиарда нам дала и даст еще 6 миллиардов. Я что, на дурака похож, что ли, от денег отказываться? У меня там связи никаких с ШИСом нет.
Protesters who'd rather not trade quick cash for their kids' health have been calling for Orlov to resign and apologize for saying they're scum.
Слово «шелупонь» было использовано, может быть, в несколько эмоциональном таком настрое, поскольку разговор был долгий, и он касался разных аспектов. Он был, между прочим, не очень открытый. Поэтому, наверное, какие-то такие эмоциональные дисфункции вокруг этого есть или неприятности. Но я не могу этим руководствоваться. Я губернатор. Я должен делать дело, и для меня это гораздо важнее. Поэтому нет, я в соответствии с теми обязанностями, которые у меня есть.
Orlov's refused to step down, but the dump's still barricaded, and the Kremlin's still planning to dump the capital's garbage in Shias.
Если там силовыми методами выселят людей из этого лагеря, будет организован другой, те, кто жители окрестных деревень, там, куда они поедут? Это их дом. И они будут биться за него до конца.
Oh, he got us again. He got us again. Oh my God.
Fuck me up, Colson.
This is a book club. We're gonna drink some alcohol. We're gonna talk about some books. We're gonna get a little petty. My guests are Debbie Millman, Open Mike Eagle, Mira Jacob, and I am Roxane Gay. He used the word cement when he should have used concrete.
Oh, that's a big thing.
That's a big thing for me. We're here to talk about The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. MacArthur winner, Guggenheim Fellow, blah, 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 Pulitzer, whatever. He can also write, except for one thing, and we'll get into it. It's a coming-of-age story set in the Jim Crow era. It's about a young man who hitchhikes on his way to college, is arrested, and goes to a reform school for boys. And his life changes forever.
Oh, God, this book. This book destroyed me. I was inconsolable at moments, experiencing the depth of his horror.
I've never experienced a book that laid out what it means to have that rich of an internal life that runs counter to everything else that's around you. Like, that mirrored a lot of how I grew up.
And that's really all you can ask for from a book.
In the moments I was reading it, it did shut out the entire rest of the world. I was with this book completely.
And I read it in one day.
Yeah, me too.
I just went right through it.
Yeah.
Not a lot of books encourage me to keep reading.
I will also say, reading that prologue and then getting to the part where it was 2014 in the book, my heart sort of turned over on itself.
It definitely was like a bookend. Like,
Yeah.
this is why we started where we started.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it both as a reader because everything fell into place.
Yes.
And then as a writer, I was irate because I was like, how dare you be this good? Because I am petty enough to say it.
Embrace your petty.
I honor and nurture it.
That's real.
The worst thing that ever happened to Elwood happened every day. He woke in that room.
That might be one of the most painful things about this book, that no matter how good he is, goodness does not overcome racism, and it does not overcome corruption.
So I think it's really interesting, right, to build a narrative where you know that at least a good portion of the audience in America is going to come to this for a redemption story, right? All the people that love Green Book want to know, right? They want to know in which way is this going to affirm some part of our humanity so we can feel great about this story. And so he's running in the face of that.
When they found the secret graveyard, he knew he'd have to return.
Because here are these young men, boys really, children, who try to create a community for themselves and try to survive. And there are these power-hungry assholes who are hell-bent on dimming whatever joy and sense of self that they develop while they're at this place. Nickel Academy is fictional in this novel, but there are Nickel Academies in every state.
It's actually based on a real place in Florida.
It is.
So what would this story look like if it was set in 2019 and was flashing forward to 2040?
It would look exactly the same.
You think so?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's what
hard to
I
hate
think
you
that's what actually made me so heartbroken. That this is a book set in the 1960s, but young Black men are still being incarcerated in this manner.
You prayed you didn't have a beating hanging over your head, or that you'd been picked for a date on Lover's Lane.
There's something that was really difficult for me to read in this book that kept coming up, and it's touched on right there, but it's the sexual trauma.
Which isn't ever touched on.
Well, I feel like it's touched on. I do feel like it's touched on enough. I feel like it gets revisited. It doesn't necessarily get unpacked.
It doesn't ever get unpacked.
That trauma, that I don't know, that was really visceral for me.
And I do appreciate the subtlety of that, because I do think all too often sexual violence is used as the only way I can think of to create drama is to throw in a rape scene.
Right.
The Game of Thrones.
Yes.
He didn't do the Game of Thrones.
He did not Game of Thrones it.
His grandmother, Harriet, had a few gospel records, which she only played when the world discovered a new mean way to work on her.
No book is perfect. The portrayal of women in this book was not good. I thought the women were oftentimes very one-dimensional. They were backdrops for men to learn things about themselves.
But it's agency too, right? There's nothing that they want other than the men in their lives. He goes through the interiority of even the white men, and I was like, where is that for the women? The women get no interiority
at all.
At all?
But it's a book about a boy in a boys' school.
Yes, but there are significant women in his life nonetheless, and those significant women deserve better than to be summarized with 1 or 2 words.
I don't think that Harriet was summarized with 1 or 2 words. I think that Harriet was a very rich character.
It's a note that we've seen so often. The long-suffering Black woman who is
The
only,
matriarch.
right,
Yeah.
only the family that she's had and lost.
That she only knows suffering. And that she's so noble in the face of that suffering. Like, the strong Black woman archetype is alive and well in this novel.
So subversive in so many other ways. It is kind of glaring that there was no subversion of the gender expectation.
Exactly. And I see this with a lot of the prominent Black male writers. Black women come last in their narratives. We give it a pass because, I mean, look at what they're doing. Look at these towering achievements. What would be a towering achievement would be for these writers to step up and give Black women some dignity in their pages. It's definitely a flawed novel, but it's just also this really satisfying story.
I think flawed is too strong a word. My opinion is that there are some inconsistencies in some areas where it's thin as opposed to muscular, but I think it's breathtaking.
And I echoed the same sentiment. It just resonates with me on an emotional level in a way that not too many pieces of media ever have.
So if you want to cry and feel emotionally devastated and otherwise obliterated,
this is
by
your
all means,
It'll tear you the fuck apart.
The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead.
Let it fuck you up.